Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Sid, who has done numerous startups and is one of the founding, managing, he's a partner at Peak Venture. And so let's give it up, a big Startup Grind welcome to Sid. You've got a few fans.
Yeah, that was great.
All right, so what I like to do is really back up to your roots. And so why don't you tell us about where you grew up and maybe some childhood experiences if they're relevant to startups.
Yeah, sure. So grew up just south of here, Pleasant Grove. I was born in LA, so my parents both kind of come from immigrants. My dad, they came on a boat from Holland, and my mom's family is all from Mexico. So melting pot in LA, but when I was 4 years old, moved to Pleasant Grove. Growing up, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what's interesting. I always felt, so I was raised by a single mom, so I always had this, I think, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I always felt like my grades, sports was something where I could create my identity and maybe make up for like other insecurities I felt. So I think I excelled, or at least tried to. Also, I think that was maybe exacerbated by, I was raised by my mom who's Mexican. I identify myself as Mexican, and I remember as a kid, elementary school, being ashamed to say I was Mexican. I would say I was Spanish. It sounded better. So I sort of had this, I would say, chip on my shoulder to just want to, do something remarkable. But then, along the way, had from mentors to father figures to others, teachers, coaches, who I felt like always were just lined up for me. A lot of serendipity growing up, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So you sort of set the stage as a little bit of an underdog.
Yeah.
And so as you grew up, did you ever try to do anything entrepreneurial, like as a high school kid or anything like that?
Not really. So my idea of security and stability was get good grades so that you could be a doctor. And so I was always like pre-med path. I was like a Sterling Scholar in science in the state.
Straight A's.
Straight A's. I had 1 A- my 8th grade year in keyboarding, of all things. I couldn't get past like 40 words a minute. And then even into college was pre-med. And I just happened to, because of a summer program, I majored in business, which exposed me eventually to entrepreneurship because I thought it would differentiate me from all the biology majors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you go wrong? Like, where did you get kicked off the pre-med track?
Yeah. Again, it was complete, I would say, accidental entrepreneurship. So some people can say, like, I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was doing lemonade stands and recycling things when I was 5 years old, right? But for me, it was, I was in an econ class. I had a roommate named Brad, who was one of my best friends, and we had this summer internship, an opportunity to get to know sales a little bit better, and we saw a bigger prize out there. And I remember stepping out of this class, writing a 3-page letter to him of like, we should just leave school and go for this.
Yeah.
And so he responded saying, I was I was waiting for this. I think he had more entrepreneurial spirit in him than I did, and I followed his lead. And then we went and we did our first startup, and then subsequent startups. And in fact, the last startup I did, which was the longest journey before becoming a VC, was with Brad as well, one of my best friends.
So he was just at the time you guys met, like, because you were in the same class, or was there any more history to that?
We were LDS missionaries in Taiwan. So we got to know each other in another country, and sort of in unique circumstances where you really just bond to someone and have like aligned maybe ideals and what you want in life. And so that bled into college roommates to partners in crime.
So now, from LDS missionaries to partners in crime, that's quite a transition.
Yeah.
So with this relationship, you guys basically did everything together. Are you guys, from your last, is he involved with Peak at all today?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
So Yeah, I feel like, that's another theme is, just this feeling of fraternity or sorority by extension of women that I've been fortunate to work with. We're super tight. I mean, if you look at the group that came together with Zinch with our last startup, Brad is now an LP in our fund. I'm a personal and institutional investor in the startup he's involved with. And then there's a handful of people. Ryan Caldwell from Money Desktop MX, he was on our team. Dave Blake from Degreed, who just raised a Series A, was on our team. Cash Merrill, who had a startup and now just joined another startup. I mean, there's like 5 or 6. I was doing the math back of the envelope, and I think we've raised about $300 million in ventures since that startup, where we only raised 8 in Zinch. We didn't raise a ton of money.
8 million does seem like a little bit of money to me. So.
No, in the grand scheme, no, it definitely, for us, I mean, it was more than we knew early on what to do with. You know, we were figuring it out. It was our first time raising venture, but yeah, so friendships have fortunately lasted. We've had plenty of disagreements, a lot of type A personalities. Yeah. That's also a theme in startups, and I feel like my life is, having to apologize a lot because you get overzealous. But there's just, I think, a brotherhood that exists amongst those people that you kind of galvanize in a startup with those that see it through together.
Okay, so that's a little bit about the relationships. So now let's back up and take us through that same timeline of the ideation. So who came up with the idea? You said that it was, you guys had like a sales opportunity or an internship. Take me through the ideation of Zinch.
Yeah, so Zinch, there are a few pieces to it. So you have Brad's kid brother, Mick, who's at Princeton University, and he's there with another good friend of ours who's doing his last company IPO'd, now he's doing his next startup. We're an investor there. Him and a guy named Jeremy Johnson are classmates at Princeton and have this idea of, wouldn't it be great in a day and age when you can connect with people via Facebook or LinkedIn, and we quickly kind of get a feel for who each other are, even if we had no background. Wouldn't it be great if American universities could similarly connect more quickly with their prospective students? Yeah. So why not build this kind of online portfolio to accomplish that? They incubated the idea at Princeton, won an early idea challenge, kind of one of these, what was then probably called the business plan competition. Okay. Business plans are sort of, the notion is a little outdated now, but, and then things didn't quite get the legs they needed there, and so Brad and I had approached Mick and said, hey, we love this idea. In our previous startup we had in Detroit, we had some interactions with students who we felt go totally under the radar, specifically like students from minority backgrounds. They're just, they're who colleges want, but they have no way of reaching them. This, we thought, was a great way to reach them. So we said we would love to mentor and invest, and later he came to us and said, look, I think would love to go into this together and really give it some legs. And so he moved to Utah. We then took that idea, and over the course of the next 6 months and a meaningful amount of our own capital, the 3 of us, came to what was early Zinch, and we're fortunate to have a big name university believe in what we were doing, and from there it started to become kind of dominoes with other colleges.
So, I mean, to me, Princeton seems to be like a sort of the mecca for meaningful resources. You used the term, it didn't have the legs at Princeton. What was it missing?
Yeah, I can't perfectly put my finger on it because I wasn't with the group at Princeton. What I will say is, and what I can talk about, is that I think that there is no better place, and this is very self-serving, but I think there is no better place to start a startup than Utah. I think that the grit of people here, you could go into all of those things, and I think probably the audience here knows it, but what we do know was early days here we had fabulous salespeople who were able to go into an industry that they had no background in, meaning selling to higher ed is very different than attending a university, right? I mean, just understanding how they work and operate that way. We had fabulous developer talent here, fabulous salespeople, just a team that for the maturity that they've gained, oftentimes that you can attribute to some of the religious culture here. There was just a staying power. We had people who were patient through really tough times. We had people we laid off and were kind enough to come back when we figured out how to make money, because early days we spent money. We weren't great, and we were cutting our teeth as entrepreneurs, I think. So what I can't tell you is what Princeton, New Jersey lacks. What I
Sure.
can tell you is
What
that
we
we
have.
had all the pieces here, from great mentors to very talented, and even if they were raw, very hungry people
Mhm.
who wanted to do something big.
Okay, so you talked about right there, you had to lay people off. What did you change that started bringing revenue in so that you could call those people back?
Yeah. Well, we realized we had to make money. So early days, we gave our product away for free. We
Okay.
thought, hey, we'll just get every school using it and
Figure it out then.
and figure it out then. Then we sort of like, no, we have to figure it out now, or
Okay.
we have to keep the lights on. We have to keep people employed, and that was hard. I mean, telling people like we can't pay you.
Sure.
Some of them agreed to stay on for some equity, but it was tough. So what we realized was we had to figure out sales, and we had to
Mhm.
figure out what schools needed. We had to build the products that made sense for them. We had to maintain a great user experience for the students who were creating profiles on our website, and so it just created this. I mean, when your back's against the ropes, you find a way to
Yeah.
figure it out. And for us, it happened to fall back on sales. And I think, I'm impressed now with the number of startups that figure revenue out early on.
Sure.
I think that's a hallmark of Utah, where there's fewer, what I would say, binary outcome type opportunities, where it's like either you get 1 billion users or this fails, because
Right.
that's the only way you'll ever monetize or attract the advertisers, right? Utah seems to have, and we maybe weren't a perfect example because we learned the hard way, but this understanding that it's good and it's okay to figure out revenue early on in
Yeah.
some businesses.
So what did you do beforehand that let you have the capital to invest in this? Was this just savings or was...
No, so I had 3 startups before. So the
Okay.
first one was kind of very lucky. It was a play in the real estate and mortgage industry in the early 2000s, and everything was
Right
going well
time.
then. The second one was a failed retail company. We tried to produce a product we thought was cool in China.
Okay.
And one container load later, we realized we're not cut out for retail. And then we had a failed tech effort. So we had some money, fortunately, from the first.
Okay.
And so we were able to put together 60, 60, 40, so 100, what's that, 121, 160 grand of
Okay.
our own money. And that was like a lot for us then.
For sure.
A lot of money relative to like what we were worth. But it gave us enough to figure out and build it, get a product that was like attracting users,
Uh-huh.
early little revenue, and it gave us a real leg up. We would have been in a harder spot because there weren't folks like Gabe and others who are arranging and putting together these opportunities to win money or earn, as an early stage startup with oftentimes little to no revenue.
Okay.
I think less of that existed then. Although we did win the Utah Entrepreneur Challenge.
Okay.
So that was 40 grand. That was very precious and meaningful early on in our startup.
Very cool. So how old were you when you did that first startup?
23.
Okay, so you guys are all coming home. You're still students?
Yeah, still
Straight A
students.
students?
At BYU, I think it started to dip.
Okay.
I wasn't that straight.
Entrepreneur starts, grades start to dip.
That's
Okay,
right.
I see
That's
the
right.
correlation.
Dropped out when I was a sophomore the first time. Eventually did come back, but yeah, our first startup, we left school for a little bit.
And then you said you looked to China on that second startup, and you learned Mandarin in Taiwan.
I did.
So, why? Why China?
Yeah, just this like excitement for something huge.
Okay.
We see the hyperbole of China. The creating a city of millions overnight. The amount of money that they're spending in international markets. The amount of consumption happening within their country, and you can't not want to understand and experience a little bit of that. And so for us, it was. We came back to Utah, we saw a product we thought was cool, we're like, well, let's produce it in China. It's an
Yeah.
excuse to deal with China. And so we cut our teeth there. And then later, we're fortunate that in Zinch, we opened an office in China and launched a completely localized version of our website for the Chinese.
Okay.
And I moved to China and with my family, and it was a cool way to then do it right. Meaning the first time it was kind of dipping your toe in, and can we figure this out? And we couldn't then, or we didn't then.
So any key takeaways from the 2 failed experiences?
Yeah.
If you label them as failed, then just
Yeah.
walk through them.
One, I think it's okay to fail. I look at those and I don't hang my head. I think what I gained from those experiences was enlightening. It was this reality that you can fail. Like it's sometimes we feel invincible. When we're in the confine, when we have steady income from a Pell Grant, maybe as a student or your parents or whatever it is, and you can test all these startups. One day, somewhere, you start walking on your own, and it's like, you don't have the training wheels, and you realize that with a failed startup, you're just like, that's money gone, and what am I going to do next? And for me, that was invigorating. Fortunately, I think maybe if I was a different type, it would may have turned me off to entrepreneurship. But I don't think that's wrong. I don't think it's for everyone. I think I respect the people who've had careers building companies and building larger companies or taking companies from small to large. We've had those folks work for us, and they're instrumental. They do things that I can't do or I'm not as apt to do. I think it also, it teaches you other things. I mean, we had partners in one that we weren't a great fit. I wouldn't call it on them. I would point the finger as much at myself of you have to have a partner that there is absolute implicit trust, an aligned sort of vision of what you want, and then the willingness to sacrifice almost at the same rate, meaning some folks, they have a certain amount of staying power and others have more or less, and you need to be arm in arm in this type of a thing, and it takes a long time sometimes. For me it did, it was like an 8-year journey with Zinch. It took a while, so fortunately we had remarkable people along the way who were there to, when I felt like I couldn't do something, they stepped up, and vice versa. We just, we complemented each other very well.
So one more live question, and I want to get to Zinch, because this seems like the grand slam of stories. But talk to us about the decision of dropping out. What were your considerations?
So I was 6 months, maybe no less, 4 months newly married. So one, there had to be, we had to be on the same page. That first time we did it together. So this wasn't like my spouse following me from my start. We ended up doing it together. It was me, Brad, and her, which was really cool. But I had to go back on maybe the promise I made my in-laws that I was going to be a doctor, and here's my path. Like, that might not happen. But no, I never felt like the 4-year sequential education was like a must, and even now more so, I don't see it that way. If my daughter, one of my children are here, if she staggers it or has a gap year or does other things in between, I think that's great. I think the notion of education is broadening from this sequential, you progress by like years. If you think about it, it's strange. We just graduate 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th. Like, why do we do that? It actually doesn't make a lot of sense. Socially it might, but in terms of learning, I don't think it does. So it wasn't too hard. So the school part of it wasn't difficult. It was making sure that someone who was like, we were partners now, much more important sense than my startup, that we were on the same page, that it worked for us, that we were okay with this type of a maybe venture, together in this case, our marriage. That was, I'd say, the biggest part of it.
So now, would you recommend people go into business with their spouse?
No. No. I think you need to be on the same page. We decided after the first one, probably halfway through the first one, that it was best to have some separation. And so we were in Detroit. She pursued a career there, which was great. And I think it was just healthier. And that's just us. I don't know. I think there are some duos, even in this state. I've looked at a handful of startups where it's siblings or even spouses who are working together, and maybe it works for them. But for us, it was too much. And the problem too was, if one of us was like managing the other in the work setting, if that spilt into an equal partnership, that's not healthy. It wasn't for us.
Awesome, I love the honesty. So now let's go to the business side of Zinch. From what I read up on Zinch, like, you guys nailed this and then hit it out of the ballpark. So just take us through more of the business side of that experience. Yeah, sure.
So there's several things I guess I could talk about. Are you most interested in kind of the evolution of, say, the team, actual dollars, where they came? Give me a little more.
So leading up to raising money.
Okay. So leading up to raising money, I remember it was yesterday. We're in our little tiny space on Center and University in Provo. we have this website that's going, we're getting like tens of, maybe hit 100 new users a day, and one day it starts to spike. And I mean like meaningfully, I think thousands.
Wow.
And we're like watching this number, checking, make sure it's real, thinking we're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, and that was where we realized we had something. That we had something that resonated with at least some portion of our target audience, which were high school students. We took that, and I think because we had some capital, because we had skin in the game, because we now had users using it, and we had early interest from colleges, we raised money in Utah.
Yeah.
We actually had a rough experience there. So we raised money in Utah. Months later, we actually bought back that equity. There was not an investor-entrepreneur fit.
Can you speak more to
Yeah,
it?
sure. So we raised money from the Utah Angels, which were an angel group that existed here. A lot of them great friends to this day. There was, I think, maybe let's chalk it up to immaturity, maybe of our team, or I think a paradigm that now is maybe less the case, which I felt like then in Utah. Again, this is 2007. Capital and the investors, the VCs, the angels viewed themselves, I think, as kind of superior to innovation. At least we felt that, and so it wasn't a good fit. So months later, again, fortunately because we had some resources, we cut checks and gave them their money back plus 10%, and kind of said, let's part ways. We asked them. There was a board meeting where literally I have an investor who says, if I could get my money back, and I looked at him and I said, really? If you could get your money back, is that what you want? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, 2 weeks from now, all of you, money back, over. And then the guys were like, how are we going to do that? I'm like, I don't know. We have to mortgage things and figure it out. So that's also, for better or worse, a little bit of pride of like, we're gonna do this our way. We're gonna figure it out, and we've never had any help like in life. No, and clearly nobody's gonna help us now.
Yeah.
So we did it. We gave them $750,000 plus their 10% back. That was hard.
Yeah.
I was sweating bullets. I was leveraged to the hilt. I thought, man, anything I had saved up, like this is where it's gonna go down the drain potentially. But it also gives you a lot of fire in your belly to say, okay, this is real, really real, and we were very fortunate to find investors. And again, the Utah Angels, a version, Utah UA2 exists today, and they're fabulous. A lot of them are the sons of some of these folks. And again, even those folks, I would say, more than half of the group we raised from are really good friends now, have a huge amount of respect. It just wasn't a good fit then. Let's chalk it up to that. So then we raised money. We have some investors who are, to this day, mentors. Mike Leventhal, he's a retired VC, he lives in Park City now. He came in, was a huge help, and others who are entrepreneurs. Levi King, who's the CEO of the company Creditera, they came in and they financed us. We raised money from them, and then later rounds. And so that was another little rough patch, but what that led to was then the ability, and we started executing. We started building, adding to our team. We started, sales were growing. It wasn't easy or perfect, but we finally found, I think, some leverage in our business, which is always what you're looking for, right? You're just finding that handhold. Like the metaphor, I think it was like rock climbing. You find that hold, and then you have something. It's a good feeling. It convinces you can do it again and again. And so it grew. We raised $8 million in venture. We moved when we raised our Series A to San Francisco. We thought that it would be most ideal for relationships, business development and such. We thought we could hire some strategic people out there. We launched in China, so I moved to Beijing. We launched a version of the site in China and continued to grow.
So did San Francisco give you what you expected?
Kind of, but not completely. So I wouldn't say we found a single person who, let me put it this way. Our hires from Stanford were no more impressive than our hires from BYU. Again, we were in Provo, so we hired more from BYU than the U. I went to both schools, and I admire both, and I think fondly of the students at both. But in fact, we found that, so the issues we did find were that hiring women in Utah was very difficult for us. Hiring men in San Francisco was very difficult for us. So we had just these funny sort of challenges in each market, but the talent was great, I think, in both. And I think our folks in Utah who were great continued to be stars. And it convinced me that I don't know if we would have had to have moved there, actually.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I would say, increasingly so, startups don't have to leave Utah. Again, depending on which space you're in, and where some of the bigger relationships exist, I think you can kind of have your cake and eat it too in this state.
Yeah.
Great for business, and in a lot of other ways, it's awesome.
So as a BYU grad tomorrow, I'm going to quote you on Twitter and say BYU grads are as good as the state.
That's right. Do it.
So you got, here you are, you're $8 million. What's the first thing you did as soon as that, you knew you were getting it? Was there a celebration dinner? Was there, you guys were just like, now what? Like, I've never.
Yeah. Well, we raised in a few raises, but no, I remember so we raised from a firm out of Chicago, Pritzker Ventures. So it's the Pritzker family is a sort of heir to Hyatt Hotels, and the Pritzkers, you know them. I see some nodding. You've been in Chicago. They were great. I remember we had a little dinner out there. It was no fanfare. I mean, raising money is only added responsibility. It's no celebration. We also had, at that point, we had brought in an outside CEO, Ann Dwayne, who is, I think, probably the single most important hire we ever made. So she became our CEO, and I think when we first had money in the bank, it was like we didn't spend any. It was like, we'll sit on this. We'll make sure that everything is extremely judicious. She is one of the most disciplined people, personally and professionally, I've ever worked with. And so we also had lessons learned from earlier money raised where I don't think we were as judicious, responsible, or just knew how to spend it. And that's part of a startup is you burn a little money. But at this point, we were, I think, increasingly, compared to before, thoughtful about how we spent money. Return on investment, whether it be marketing dollars or sales hires or developers, right? We had to see clear ROI. And in fact, if it didn't work with folks, we would cut it off quickly. We got better at sort of throwing some lines in and then realizing when you have to cut bait sometimes. Yeah. Still had challenges, but I think had a much more predictable trajectory from there.
Okay, so now with moving to China, what were some of the challenges you faced?
Wow. I think the biggest challenge early on was appreciating a different way of doing business. That in China, if you grow up in a system where you never question your teacher ever, and you have no seminars or conjecture between and disagreements that are kind of appreciated and people want, then I had come to appreciate the fact that people wouldn't disagree, and that was bad sometimes. You'd almost have to say, like, you have to disagree with me. We have to debate this issue. We're looking for the best solution, not my solution or her solution, but the best solution. So it was coming to appreciate not only them bending this way, but of course, I think perhaps even more so me bending that way and realizing how employees, what motivated them. It wasn't the same way. I think employees here are like, what's my path to a director and then a VP, right, and whatever. There, I don't think it's quite the same, and that's okay, So the motivations and what's built into us in the American dream and just our aspirations to climb and work our way to the top sometimes is different. So that was a challenge, and then just living there. I commuted an hour and a half by subway. We had 2 kids and 1 on the way. We had our 3rd child born to us there. She had medical issues. Had to fly her and my wife back, so I'm kind of become a single dad with 2 kids and a nanny who only speaks Chinese. So there was one day where I get a call and she says, in Chinese, she's like, "Your son locked himself in the room, and I can't." And this is my 3-year-old, and I can't communicate with him on how to unlock it. And so he's locked, he's screaming, I'm an hour and a half away and I'm going, what do I do? Like, it's not just like I call up my buddy and say, oh, can you go to my house? Because everybody else is like me, they're working in, it's a city, it's a major urban 23 million people city. So there were little challenges like that where you just, you come to appreciate a little bit of, call it work-life balance or the work-life struggle, I felt it like in a heightened sense in China. It was tough, really tough.
Okay, now take us up to getting acquired.
Yeah. So we were growing the business, and like I said, we found what I would call leverage in our business, where we realized that with the unit economics, that if we put in $1 here, we could get that out the other side. When you figure that out, and when those economics are favorable, meaning 1 in yields 1.1 or 1.5 or 2 out, then all of a sudden venture capitalists love it, right? It's like, we want to dump money in, right? So I think we were definitely getting there, and we had a Series C raise on the line. We had a term sheet for Series C. We're going to raise $12 million more. And at the time, we also had a strategic partnership with Chegg, and we were the Chegg leadership had shared with us the vision of Chegg, and we really believed. And so they made an offer to acquire the company, and it made sense. And I remember sitting with the CEO, so I'm kind of the founder, left out of our crew with our CEO and their CEO and the founder of Chegg, and it was cool. We had this discussion, and I sort of saw the light in their eyes and really believed it. And it was a good decision. They went on to, 2 years after acquisition, they IPO'd. We were a part of that. It was a cool experience. Some of the best leadership I've seen. Dan Rosenzweig is a fabulous CEO. I think they're doing some remarkable things, and they'll continue to do that. So I remember when it happened, I was in Copenhagen in a conference. Finally the deal closes, and I hang up the phone in my hotel room, and I just start crying. It was strange. And it was just I think what it was though, it was for me that all of that early days, the challenges, the sweat, China, all these things, it was finally almost just a little bit of a release. It wasn't, we still had a journey ahead, right? It was I won't show all the details of the deal, but it was a partial cash, partial equity. We were very incented to continue, of course, to build for the new brand. But at that point, it was just it was a cool feeling.
Yeah. Okay, so now transitioning to a VC.
Yeah.
What point sometimes you'll see entrepreneurs kind of take some time off, go travel or do whatever. Did you do any of that?
I promised my wife 6 months. I said, we'll do 6 months, we're going to go around the world, blah, 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 and that turned into a week and a half. The problem was that I was talking to a good friend, another entrepreneur, Jeff Birmingham. We had played pickup ball for a decade. I was an investor in the real estate firm that he had built with a few partners, Peak Capital. And why am I bringing that up? Oh, because the opportunity, so when he approached me with this and said, look, I'm raising a fund, it came together more quickly than I thought. And I could have been on the sidelines, but man, when the fund was coming together, I wanted to be right there for, kind of the breaking of the glass on the boat type of a thing. And so I said, look, sweetheart, you'll have a little bit of time. We did have, since then, we've gone to New Zealand. We've had some fun adventure. We have more planned. But it was just, I felt like opportunity called. And if you think back, so part of my motivation for being an investor now was that first experience was I saw the best, I think, and worst of this entrepreneur-investor relationship. And so there was, again, I think, a chip on my shoulder. I remember saying, to Jeff one time, if I ever have the opportunity, or if we have the opportunity, let's do venture right, in our state. Now, I say that carefully because there's so many funds, all the funds. We've worked with, I think almost without exception, all of them in Utah. And they've come a long way since I was raising. Many of them didn't exist when I raised. And I've only been impressed with the people that I've served on boards with or co-invested with, from Kickstart to Signal Peak to Epic to Pelion, just great funds and good people. And I think generally, Utah now, we're landlocked, we're mountain locked, we have inversion, we're our own bubble, right? And then culturally, we talk about a bubble, but I think that's changed quickly. And I think for most of us, I'm I don't feel it, meaning information travels, so I think it's created a rising tide, and all boats have risen with that tide in Utah, and we're fortunate to be a part of it. We feel like it's a great time to be investing. So I'm pumped to be doing this. It's exciting. I get the itch to get operationally involved, and so that's part of our thesis. Is in addition to putting capital in, we put time. Today, all day I was with our portfolio companies, from interviewing new hires to talking with them through strategy to making an introduction to somebody I thought would be interesting for them. So it's early days, but we're really enjoying it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone in the audience a chance just here in a minute to ask your own questions. So be thinking about that, and then I'll come around with the microphone. So with Peak, what are you guys trying to specialize in? Are trying to go after tech, or is there a particular theme that you're looking for?
Yeah, heavy focus on tech, so software before probably hardware. We feel like there's just more experience there as a team. We've built a team and we're all operator entrepreneurs. We've all raised money. We've all had failure and some moderate success. And so we're looking, we're focused on early stage. That's not just seed. We've also invested in Series A rounds, but early stage. And we want to look for, aside from all the things of what we're looking for in the company, we want to look for deals where we feel we can add value.
Okay.
So we want entrepreneurs who are like, you know what, I kind of want somebody in my corner who is a little bit of a fighter, who does have a little bit of an underdog mentality, because we still do. I think if you look at our team, we're confident, but we're all, I think, pretty grounded dudes who still have something to prove and want to do that with our teams and fight for them and with them. So that some people just want capital, and it's a credit to them because it probably means they've figured it out within their business. Others, and oftentimes the trend in early stage investing is that they're still figuring it out, and we like that. It's broad in Utah. We do a little bit of investing outside of Utah. When we are outside of Utah, we focus heavily on ed tech because of my last venture, and then real estate tech, which because of the peak real estate portfolio and what Jeff Birmingham has built, it's very accretive to what we're doing there, and what the real estate portfolio we have is very interesting for the companies that we invest in. So outside of Utah, it starts to narrow. In state, we want to look at all. We want to look at a lot and all the great deals and exciting entrepreneurs.
Okay, and do you think you'll ever feel the itch to, go off and do your own again?
No question. Yeah, that's I feel it all the time. Feel it when I listen to other entrepreneurs. I think it's fulfilled in what I'm doing now. Meaning, I think if we get more passive in our investing, I probably couldn't handle it. I don't think we will. Meaning our activity in working with our teams. But who knows? We don't feel like we have a set path on how we operate as a VC. We're different than most in that we do have these unique backgrounds. So I don't know what that means for our future, but we're always open to innovative ways to think about straddling this line of VC and entrepreneur, because I consider myself an entrepreneur first. It's what I've known. In fact, it's kind of TBD if I'll even be a decent VC. So we'll see.
That's awesome. All right, guys, let's give a big thank you to Sid. All right, now time for your questions. If you'll raise your hand, I'll run the mic to you and you can ask away. Do we have any questions?
Tell me what you do for the first 60 minutes of your day. Like, how do you get your day going?
Yeah. I like to sit and just, I like to look through the day and have a moment of what happens is the temptation is to get right into my emails or to start right into one thing. I like to just focus on what are the 3 big rocks I have to move today. So typically that's what are the 3 companies we've invested in that I need to touch base with, or what problem are they trying to solve right now that I can help with. But it usually boils down to actually very few things. Once I've prioritized those in my schedule, then in the blocks that are open, I feel like I can tackle all the busy things, which is usually email, just catching up. So it's a quiet kind of prioritization of my day.
So my question is, what is early stage startup to you, and what do you look for when you invest in an early stage? Is it a team size? Is there a minimum team size? Is there an MVP?
Yeah, great question. So I don't think I would have been able to answer this as well a year ago, but having just had an advisory committee meeting and just talked through our first 20, we made 22 investments in 20 companies in the first year of our fund. We are off to a roaring start. We think that will slow a little bit the second half of the year in that we'll probably focus on fewer companies. But what that means is, first of all, it's relative. So the problem sometimes is when I talk to an entrepreneur and I'm saying, here's what we invest and here's what we expect, they'll go, well, that's, they almost say, well, seed investing is this. And I say, well, look, it's different from Boulder to San Francisco to New York to Utah. All I can tell you is there is this ever moving and dynamic and fluid flow of deals. So really what's going on in my life that the entrepreneur doesn't see, but that I'll tell you is, I'm seeing a certain number of deals, and all those deals have certain characteristics. Right now, what I could tell you is that early stage for us is that you don't have, maybe you haven't nailed product market fit, but you've come pretty darn close. You probably have revenue. So I would say right now, and again, there's no hard and fast for us and for a lot of VCs, not all, but for a lot. But typically you have revenue. So we've done 2 pre-revenue deals out of 22, right? Now some would say, well, early, you're still figuring out product market fit, pre-revenue, that's seed stage investing. And I would say, you're right. But then I could also say seed stage investing also can encompass, for us, more than that. Part of it's a function of the ecosystem. So right now in Utah, the reality is there are deals where there are repeat entrepreneurs who are still figuring out but have made real headway on their product and fitting that product to their market that they're serving, and who have early revenue. So chances are, peak right now is looking at those deals the closest, and the deals that are not quite there. Either it's a first time for this entrepreneur, that's something against you. It doesn't mean you don't get invested in, but the reality is if Zach Mangum just, he last deal he did was Grow Social, me investing in his most recent deal is something that it's more likely because he's been through that, and there's just something you learn in going through it. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed your second time around, right? But it just means there's something. If there's a deal that has revenue and yours doesn't, again, that's something that they have. So there's not a perfect answer. If you're lacking one but are crushing it on another, so we have a deal where they're first-time entrepreneurs, their revenue is just like awesome. I mean, we've given them money and they've hardly spent any of it. I'm just saying, you guys, because every month they're adding on to their monthly recurring revenue. So despite it being their first rodeo, as we call it, they figured out the revenue piece really early, and it's scaling very nicely. So what I would say is, you can ask reasons why. Every deal that we do, you can go to our blog and I tell you why we invested, if it's one that I led, and my partner does it for the ones that he led. We try to say, here's why we did it, here's why we believe. You can ask me why I passed on your deal. If you bring your deal and we pass, I try to articulate, I'm not going to give many paragraphs, but I try to give a thoughtful paragraph to say, here are the 3 things, or 2 things that we see. I never got that transparency early on, and when people passed on us, I didn't know why, and it bugged me. And I don't think a VC owes that to an entrepreneur. We think it's just good. There's all I have. In my interactions, it is the opportunity for, I think, a positive experience. Because if I pass on this deal, but you have a great one, or that turns into a great one, I hope you look back and say, he was a cool guy. He passed, and I disagree with why he passed, but at least he gave me the respect of shedding a little bit of light on his or her decision making, right? Sure. Is that helpful? Sorry, a little vague still.
No, that's good. Can I follow up with a quick question?
Sure.
So out of the 20-something deals you've done, what is the average deal size?
So we bucket them, the best way to view it would be, what is the average? So we bucket them into 3 distinct buckets. We have micro deals, where we're talking less than 50K. We've done 3 or 4 of those. These are opportunistic, typically later stage, but we really like the entrepreneur, we love the deal, we want to be a part of the deal, we want to have our name attached, and we want to help them because we think we can have value. Small dollars, right? We have syndicate deals where also we're putting in relatively less dollars, closer to like 100 to maybe 250, and that's also one where we've not led the deal, someone else has led, we've come in opportunities, and then we have what we call core, and that's what I would say is our sweet spot. That's like right where I want to hit the ball, right in our strike zone, right in the middle of it. And those are deals where we're typically leading. We're putting in between 250 and 750, up to $1 million in the deal, and we're taking an active role. And when I say active role, I just mean we're talking. Like I text with my entrepreneurs like once a day, maybe at least once every 3 days. We're talking. They're swinging by. I'm swinging by. I work this afternoon out of one of their offices. That type.
Finally, how do you determine valuations? Is it a function of revenue and some of these earlies that don't have revenue?
Yeah.
How do you value?
Yeah, no perfect formula is the real answer. I would say, we have a sense for, our job is to help you here, right, to get here, right? Yeah. We have a sense for the here. We know what it looks like in Utah because we work closely with those funds. We can see enough of it, and we follow the data closely outside of Utah, so we have a sense for it. So we then like to say, how can for our dollars we get the equity in your company we need so that over the course of this deal it makes sense, right? While setting you up appropriately. So sometimes I will, and it sounds self-serving, I'll say, look, if you get too aggressive anchoring with us in seed, guess what? You could price yourself out or be in a tough spot when you're raising your next round. But without getting into too much of the detail, I would say there isn't a perfect formula, though, based on the vertical you're in and you're serving, the space you're serving, the revenue you have, and the team. Again, all the same reasons we would probably invest. We have a thesis then for where we would, value and dollars you need, right? If you need 250 versus 750, there's a little bit of a difference.
Well, there's going to be some kind of equity trade-off or something at that point, right? So you're still doing evaluation in respect.
Yeah, we care about in those core deals percentage we have in the deal oftentimes.
Absolutely.
Not always, but oftentimes.
So I have a quick question about, these early ones you identify.
Yeah.
I imagine they just have these grand assumptions of what they're going to accomplish, and they're going to sell it to everybody, and it's all roses and rainbows.
They better, or we wouldn't invest.
Right. So my question is, if you don't see that in them, how do you let them know softly, or what's your strategy on how to paint reality for certain people? And another thing I think is more important is, what are the hard questions you have to ask these early stage that really get them kind of thinking straight and really looking at things? What are the hard questions you ask?
Yeah. I don't know if they're always hard questions. So I'm a believer that honesty is good if it can be taken constructively. In other words, sometimes I'm sitting across the table and I may say I don't think it's going to help the situation if I point something out. I'll think, and so I won't. I don't think there's a perfect way I deal with entrepreneurs, and I'm figuring it out. We have one deal we're in right now where literally the first meeting, he curses at me, I curse at him, I walk out of the room, and we end up doing the deal later because afterwards I was like, okay, I don't think I handled that well. So I called him to I was like, I'm sorry, I acted I don't know why I went crazy, but I get so into it. It's hard for me to not be myopic in the moment of thinking this is everything, because we like to think that we give a lot to the deals that we do end up investing. But we end up investing in the deal. I come to find out I actually loved his tenacity in this case. I won't tell you the deal because I don't want to embarrass him or whatever. If it goes well, one day I'm going to say that. Remember we fought our first meeting. But I think there's some questions that we do ask that are important. So I'd like to get a sense for how they view their exit opportunity. Because one, I don't think, we think about that, but I don't want entrepreneurs in 3 years I'm going to sell my company. I don't know. To me, I want them so grandiose and big and chasing something that opportunities will come if you execute on it. So I like to see too, because one time I had one who said, oh, I could, for sure 3 years, because it almost alluded to because I wouldn't go longer than that. In my mind, I'm going, took me 8. At 3, I would have made no money, and it would have been, I would probably not want to tell you the deal I did because it would had nothing to be proud of yet. So we like to I like to ask questions that I don't think are the hard questions as much as just trying to get to know them. I like to ask something like, tell me about a failure you've had, because if they kind of say more or less I haven't, then I'm I don't want to work with you because you're lying, or you haven't tasted yet what defeat can feel like, and I think you need to understand that before know how deep you can go, and to be able to eventually succeed. So maybe a roundabout way to answer, but hopefully that's helpful.
All right, so we'll make this our last question.
You talked about the stage in your startup where you're trying to figure out sales. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about the challenges you had with that, and what advice would you give a startup company that's in that stage of their early days?
Yeah. So I think we fancied ourselves early on as student first, which was right. I think that was our first customer, but we started focusing all activities so that they would bend around the student in this case. We were also taking money from schools. So sometimes those were at odds. We were kind of serving two masters. It was a little bit of chicken and an egg scenario. We had to get the students for the schools to be interested. We had to have a good product for the schools. With sales, we eventually, when it took off, was when we finally said, we can provide an awesome user experience, but we're not going to be a destination for students. it'll be an experience, a transaction, but they're going to go to Facebook. They're going to go to, we're not going to be this destination, which we kept almost like wanting to build toward. When we finally said, okay, we can nail the transaction, make it a great experience, but realize a kid may come here once or twice or 3 times, but that's okay. It allowed us to focus on our customer. In any sales situation, call it needs assessment or whatever way you want to paint it, understanding your customer and really listening, and then really, listening well and grasping the right things from listening that are reality for them, and then meeting them with your product. It sounds simple, but it was really hard for us. When we finally hit it, we found gold, I think, in there. And so we had great salespeople, I think, from day one, and then we continued to hire great ones. So it wasn't just hiring good people. I think we had a decent sales process, but it was when we really understood our customer. As simple as that sounds, where it impacted how we viewed ourselves as a business. We knew what we were going to be to students, what we weren't going to be, and so we could focus all that, what was previously a lot of energy here, on our customer, and so sales were impacted positively by that.